just after 7:30 a.m. this morning, and we're leaving Cook City, Montana on our way to Yellowstone National Park. The car was iced over when we came out to it this morning. It took a while to clear the windscreen so we could see out. Less than 15 minutes down the road and we arrive at the Yellowstone Northeast entrance. And before we know it, we're on our way into Yellowstone National Park. We're driving through Lamar Valley in the northeast section of the park, alongside Soda Butte Creek. As we rounded the curve, we came across our first bison for the day. Quite undisturbed by us as we slowly drive by.
There's a herd there. Car coming, is there?
There were more bison just down the road, so we pulled over to take a look.
Be careful, Flea.
I looked back down the road where we had just come from and saw quite a few of them crossing the road. I just stood there watching them for a while, rather than just taking photos and videos the whole time. It was nice to just take it in. Not far down the road, we encounter more bison.
Beautiful.
Still driving alongside Soda Butte Creek. And more bison, a little closer this time. Sometimes we would pass cars parked on the side of the road and see people with binoculars or cameras with long lenses, possibly sighting wildlife in the distance. I often thought about pulling over to ask them what they were seeing, but we never did.
Maybe they could see bars.
We're out of the Lamar Valley now and are climbing a little higher. As we drove south towards Canyon Village, we saw a deer cross the road in front of us and start feeding on the roadside. Quite dramatic cliffs here. We came across a small parking area, so we stopped to check out the view. Now we're crossing the Washburn Range through Dunraven Pass. Our next stop is at Washburn Springs Overlook, from where the steaming springs can be seen in the distance.
Supposed to be what?
Hot springs.
Oh, there they are.
We're now heading for the south rim of the Grand Canyon of Yellowstone for views of the falls on the Yellowstone River, which flows through the canyon. We're now crossing the Yellowstone River, and the bridge we're on will be visible from the overlook behind the upper falls. So these are the upper falls, and the bridge in the distance is the one we just crossed to get here. We've now driven further along the south rim of the canyon, and we're at Artist Point. This is the canyon downstream from the falls, and this is the lower falls of the Yellowstone River from Artist Point. We've driven around to the north rim of the canyon. This is from a viewpoint just near Lookout Point. We're still looking at the Grand Canyon of Yellowstone. Here's another view of the lower falls from Lookout Point. There's the Yellowstone River right down there. We've moved on to Inspiration Point, also on the north rim of the canyon. We can just get a peek of the lower falls from Inspiration Point. It was getting close to lunchtime, so we headed for Canyon Village and had lunch at this place, which had quite a retro 50s look. Next stop is Norris Geyser Basin. This part of it is called Porcelain Basin and is quite colourful. On the way to our next planned stop, we came across this picturesque scene with some bison grazing near the Gibbon River. It's such a nice drive here, driving alongside the Gibbon River. Now we're driving alongside the Firehole River. Again, such a pretty drive. Eventually I couldn't take it anymore and I had to pull over and take some photos.
Beautiful photo, I think.
When we arrived at the parking lot for Grand Prismatic Spring, it was quite full and congested. Thankfully, on the next lap around, we came across someone who was leaving. Hot spring water flows into the Firehole River. This is the Excelsior Geyser crater. The Excelsior Geyser last erupted in 1985, but could erupt again at any time. Apparently, every year, hundreds of hats have to be fished out of the steaming water. It was difficult to see the colours of Grand Prismatic Spring as there was so much steam, but I put my 360 cam on a 3 metre stick to get a higher view, just slightly better. And a 360 degree view. This is the opal pool and the turquoise pool. And let's get going to our next stop, which is Old Faithful Snow Lodge, which is our accommodation for the night.
What's that say there?
We're booked on the Twilight on the Firehole tour at 5 p.m, which leaves from Old Faithful Inn. And that's our yellow tour bus right there, parked out the front ready for a 5 p.m. departure. We have to meet our tour guide inside the hotel lobby. Time to get the tour started.
Can y'all hear me yet?
Yes.
Hello? The other one, y'all look like a very rambunctious bunch. So,
We can see Old Faithful steaming as we leave the inn.
that lives up there that presses charges for any. I gave the tour that I would give my mom when she was here the first time, if I knew all the knowledge. I knew.
We're at the Continental Divide, and this is Isa Lake. This is at Craig Pass in Yellowstone.
You'll actually see
Water from one side of the divide flows to the Atlantic Ocean, and from the other side flows to the Pacific. As I mentioned earlier, the tour is in an historic yellow tour bus. These buses were first rolled out in Yellowstone in the 1920s. We're now driving alongside the Firehole River in Firehole Canyon.
I still have the top undone. So I looked like 2 weeks out there, right where the camp was. There's usually like a stop and get out for here, but let's do a stop and stand out at the top for here. This is the final
As it said on the sign, these are the Firehole Falls.
those blended veils and the wicked fall. You don't see the individual properly. Oh, well, I just slipped, officer. Okay, so it's illegal to slip or fall off of it. But, as you keep your eyes monogamous, so ospreys will be polite. And they will generally estimate.
We're back on Grand Loop Road, still driving alongside the Firehole River. We drove this section of road ourselves earlier today, and now we're doing it on the tour. This is our last stop for the tour, which is a Great Fountain Geyser Pool. The geyser goes off in the 3.5 to 11 hour range, not as predictable as Old Faithful. While we were watching the sunset, White Dome Geyser, which is just a little further down the road, started erupting.
Oh, nice. It looks like White Dome is going off and you're like frustrated and your head's about to blow.
What a great sunset tonight. What was it?
When we got back to Old Faithful Inn, we had dinner in the dining room, just for the experience. Here's where we went, mostly driving southwest through Yellowstone. And of course, the bigger picture. Today we had breakfast in the Obsidian dining room at Old Faithful Snow Lodge, where we stayed last night. Even though we were staying just across the road from Old Faithful, we hadn't seen it erupt yet. I found out that the next eruption was due in about 25 minutes' time, so I had to quickly eat and get across to the geyser to be ready for it to erupt. I arrived about 5 minutes before it was due. Thankfully, there weren't many people there to watch it, so no problem getting a good viewing spot. There were a couple of false alarms where I thought it was going to go off, but fizzled out. Then finally off it went, just a few minutes late. and then it's all over for another 1.5 hours or so, give or take. Today we're heading out of Yellowstone and into Grand Teton National Park. We hadn't planned on visiting West Thumb Geyser Basin, but since we were driving past, we thought it might be worth a look. That's the Thumb paint pots directly in front of us, with Yellowstone Lake in the background, and this particular part of the lake is called West Thumb. That's the Absarika Mountains in the distance, which are also in Yellowstone National Park. Back on the road, and once again we're crossing the Continental Divide in a different place. Not far down the road, and we found ourselves driving next to this rather serene looking lake, Lewis Lake. It was worth a stop to have a look. We're now exiting Yellowstone through the south entrance, and we'll soon be entering Grand Teton National Park.
Let's see. Stupid sunlight.
About 10 minutes down the road, and we enter Grand Teton. It didn't take too long before we had a view of the Grand Tetons. This is Jackson Lake. It is quite hazy or smoky today, so the view of the mountains isn't as good as it could be on a clear day. We turned off to Leaks Marina, hoping to get lunch at the restaurant, but it had closed for the season. However, the view of Jackson Lake and the Grand Tetons was magnificent.
It's really beautiful.
Make a U-turn.
Gosh, Billy, that's amazing.
It was the second week of October, but many eateries in Grand Teton had closed for the season already. We drove a bit further down North Park Road, which is one of the main roads through Grand Teton, and turned off to Colter Bay Village, but it was all closed up except for campers.
Stay on Colter Bay Village Road.
I'm happy to stay here. I can take a photo through here. Wow, eh?
However, again, there was a lovely view of Jackson Lake and the Tetons. Some nice autumn foliage on display as we cross Pilgrim Creek.
Thank you, honey. Oh, look at that. Wow.
We come across Willow Flat, which offers some good views of the mountains. It's time to turn off North Park Road and head in towards Jenny Lake, which I have heard is quite picturesque. Views of the Grand Tetons aren't in short supply as we drive along this road.
So get out of the way.
We're still driving along Jackson Lake, and at one point, such a beautiful view opened up before us. Only 5 minutes down the road, and we saw a sign saying restaurants. Given our experience so far, we weren't too hopeful this place would be open, but to our surprise, it was, and it was busy. We tried to get a table to have lunch, but there was a wait, so we just got takeaway and ate it in the car.
Okay, so I'll drop you off.
Thank you.
Turn left toward Inner Park Road, Signal Mountain Lodge Road. Then
We found a spot in the car park with a reasonable view, and this is what we looked at while we ate. After lunch, we continued on towards Jenny Lake. With these spectacular views of the mountains, it's difficult not to keep pulling over to take photos. We didn't get too far down the road before there was another photo opportunity presenting itself and a place to pull over.
Man, oh man, look at that.
We're now approaching Jenny Lake Overlook. This is a one-way loop road, so there's no turning around and going back.
I'm happy to stay in the car, Flea.
After continuing around the loop road, we start heading back to the main North Park Road for other viewpoints I want to stop at. One of the viewpoints is Oxbow Bend, which we're arriving at now. Beautiful view of Oxbow Bend and the Snake River. As we continue on our way, we notice some horses in the meadow, which look quite picturesque with the mountains behind. We had a quick stop at the Snake River Overlook. Then on our way to the next stop, which is Schwabacher's Landing. The first part of the road in there is paved, but then it changes to dirt, and quite a bump in the transition.
Good lad. Good lad, Flea.
A little further along the road to Schwabacher's Landing, we came across a place to pull over, so we made use of it to check the view. There is a walk from the car park to get to the best views, but definitely worth it. We have one last stop for the day before heading for our lodging for the night.
Continue on Antelope Flats Road for 1.
This place is called Mormon Row. Such a delightful view with the mountains behind. Now we're coming into Jackson, Wyoming, where we will spend the night.
Google Maps. Search for supermarket.
Yep.
The park in the middle of the town has arches made out of antlers.
Oh, wow.
That's what I'm going to go and see.
In 800 feet, turn right onto Mercel Avenue.
See, there's an arch.
There's one of the antler arches on the left that the town is famous for.
Just got to find somewhere to park.
Another one of the famous elk antler arches at another corner of the park. Here's where we travelled today, mostly driving south. And in perspective. Another day, and we're hitting the road at about 8:30 this morning. We stayed at the Elk Country Lodge in Jackson last night. We don't really have any stops planned today, just a day of driving, repositioning to another state. It's quite scenic as we head south and leave Jackson behind us. Here we're crossing the Snake River, which we saw numerous times during our drive through Grand Teton National Park.
Bighorn sheep, maybe.
Yeah. Did he flash the lights at you to tell you?
I don't know.
Okay. You gotta keep your wits about you, hey? Wow.
As we got further south, the countryside flattened out considerably. We came across this country store, and Fiona was wanting a coffee, so we stopped and had a look. As we were continuing our drive, Fiona noticed some cowboys in the distance driving cattle, so we pulled over to take a look.
Let's see if we can see any Wyoming.
It seemed like that would be something to expect to see in Wyoming. It's quite a nice view from this point. Once again, we're on Interstate 80, but heading east this time and passing another quite lengthy train. We're now crossing the border into our 11th state on this trip, Colorado. We haven't long been in Colorado when the landscape starts to change yet again. On our journey to Estes Park, we were pleasantly surprised by this very scenic drive that unfolded before us as we drive alongside Horsetooth Reservoir. Now we're crossing Soldier Canyon Dam, with Fort Collins on our left and Horsetooth Reservoir on our right. We're still driving alongside Horsetooth Reservoir and we're about to cross Spring Canyon Dam.
Towns all down there, you can see them. Check out the house up there.
As we head towards Estes Park, we need to drive through Big Thompson Canyon. And that's the Big Thompson River we're driving alongside. It's another nice drive through this canyon, again quite unexpected. There's a lot of these little villages all along the road through the canyon. We've arrived in Estes Park, Colorado, and now we're heading for our accommodation for the night. Here's our accommodation, Historic Crags Lodge.
Your destination is on the left.
We get a view over Estes Park from our room. Thankfully, we arrived while there was still a bit of light so we could see it. Here's where we travel today, generally heading southeast. And the bigger picture.